Hello, my name is Graeme Park and welcome to this Creative Futures event here in the School of Creative Arts at Glyndwr University in Wrexham. This is where we bring industry professionals to talk to our students about what they do in their field. This time we're joined by Tony Andrews from Funktion One, and Funktion One make live sound systems that have a fantastic worldwide reputation. And welcome to Creative Futures, Tony.
Thank you very much, Graeme.
Now, before we talk about Funktion One, just a bit about yourself. You've been doing this for a very long time, since the 70s?
Indeed,
and,
yes.
First thing I want to just touch on, you were involved in the First Glastonbury.
Well,
or one of the First Glastonburys.
It depends exactly where you draw that line. Michael Eaves did do something in 1970 that was, I think, about 800 or 900 people.
Yeah.
The underground that was in Notting Hill Gate at the time, people like Mick Farron, Pink Fairies, various magazines, were looking for a place to have an event. Because people were reacting to John Lennon's Come Together. There was a feeling that we needed to get our consciousness together and around music. And plus it was quite near Glastonbury, and there was John Michel's book had just come out about the ley lines. So people were buzzing on that. And somehow it all finished up in Eaves's Field in 1971. So that was the one I was at.
But how did you get involved in doing the sound? How, did you get a call or did you ask?
I was being a roadie for Pink Fairies and Hawkwind at the time, and it was very much the counterculture, and you know, that was my contribution, if you like. So because I was in that circle of people, which was quite broad at the time, I got to know about it, and you know, was put forward to do the sound, which, well, that's another story.
So did you, well, yeah, that is another story, but we may touch on that later, but did you build the sound system, or did you just go and get speakers and make a sound system out of stuff that existed?
No, we were building then. That's how I started, building loudspeakers.
Okay, so what was your train of thought? Rather than go, I'm going to go and buy some speakers, plug them together to make a great sound system, why did you go, no, I'm going to go and build some speakers instead? Why build? Why not buy?
Well, it was cheaper for a start, and I think you're buying a driver. It's probably more, you know, you're buying something that means something. Whereas buy a speaker, you don't really see the driver. It's just the whole finished product. And that was a time when we had a lot of speaker companies in the country. Wharfdale comes. In fact, I remember the speakers. They were RS Super 12s, and the high frequencies were on a parasitic cone. And okay, so you done 12-inch with a parasitic cone wasn't, shall we say, as dynamic and perhaps full range as is possible these days. But it was all time coherent because everything was coming off one voice coil. So there was some positives about that, and got me stuck into woodwork. I'd been very much building model aeroplanes when I was a boy, so I was fully familiar with glue and cardboard and things like that. And you know, a difficulty for me, or it's because it's not my natural area, is that I have to be quite good at. I don't mind computers, but networks are a specialist subject, and you know, that has very much become part of audio now. So probably the most stressy thing for me coming to do this is to make sure that the switches and everything and Dante's all operational the way it should be, and I don't learn quite as fast as I used to.
Okay, now you presumably as a young man you were going to concerts, yeah?
Oh, very much so, yeah.
At what point did you go, yeah, this sounds good, but I think I can make it sound better. Is that what you did?
Yes.
But why? I mean, you go to a concert, presumably you're indulging, enjoying yourself, like people at concerts do. At what point did you go, hang on a minute?
Well, okay. Let's think for a sec. So the point of building the speakers was to listen to a stereo because I suppose I was 9 years old when Elvis Presley's You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog appeared, and my dad was fairly professional. He had quite a posh thing called a radiogram.
Yeah.
And there was a speaker each end of the thing with the record player in the middle and a radio. And I can remember I used to put, well, that's what I heard the Elvis Presley track on. And my reaction at 9 years old, because I never heard rock and roll before, I had all this electricity going up my spine. And I thought, I don't know what this is, but it's really good, and I've got to get some more of it. And it sort of went from there. So I started listening, like Radio Luxembourg, the pirate radios, Radio London and Radio Caroline out in the North Sea, and just got into loudspeakers and, you know, bigger speakers or whatever to get more of the effect, and finished up building my own. And I immediately put one there and one there. So I basically was in a room, I don't know, 10, 15 foot, 5 meters, and I put the speakers each side. I know that you're supposed to put them like that, but right from the get-go, I never wanted to do that. I wanted the dimension.
So you're an inquisitive mind and someone who's prepared to experiment, yeah? But why? I mean, you say you heard You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog and put electricity up your spine. You say you want more of that. That was similar to me a bit later in the 70s. But I wanted to go and make music. Why did you want to go and make speakers? How's that?
Because I really loved the big audio. It was, there were plenty of people making music, but not so many people actually making loudspeakers. And it became pretty obvious that the weakness in the whole presentation was the loudspeakers. You know, your amplifiers get measured in fractions of a percent distortion. Speakers are in whole numbers. And I can remember going to Bath and West Showground, seeing Jimi Hendrix at the Isle of... Actually, I didn't see Jimi Hendrix at the Isle of Wight. He was there, but I was with the Pink Fairies and Hawkwind doing the, you know, the free bit, like the anti-festival. It was already going on at that point that music should be for the people and free and all this good stuff. So I was outside, but and I was building speakers to do this, and so the whole process has been build some loudspeakers, go out and do a show with it. And at that point, there was only 4x12s really, and that was Charlie Watkins, and they were okay. And I did go as a punter to Bath and West, which was the one where there was Jefferson Airplane, Dr. John, Frank Zappa, and it was quite an experience. But you know, the audio was not. I wanted something that size to experience the kind of audio I was getting in my bedroom, if you like.
Yeah. So presumably, you realised you'd hit onto something, and presumably people were coming to you going, "This sounds amazing. Can you come and do it for us?" Is that how it started?
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean,
this is pre.
It's all relative, isn't it?
It is relative.
You know, at the time, it probably was fairly good. If we listen to it now, we wouldn't think so.
But when did you we've advanced several decades. Technology has advanced. Knowledge has advanced.
Supposedly, yes. Some of the improvements are probably retrograde.
Okay. But when did you decide, hang on, I think I can make a business out of this? Or you set up Turbo Sound, didn't you? What made you go and set up Turbo Sound?
No, there's about 2 or 3 companies before that.
Oh, okay.
Let's see, I had Cosmic Boxes, peace sounds.
I can see a thread developing here.
Yeah, exactly. Sonic trucking.
All right. But Turbo Sound's the first one that was became a known brand. Yeah?
Indeed, you are correct.
And people now still get all teary-eyed about the Turbo Sound TMS3. Tell us about that. It did have a massive impact on the industry, didn't it? And it won a Queen's Award for export. What was the driving force behind Turbo Sound and the TMS3?
Well, okay. Early sound systems were in separate components. You know, you had your bass bins, you had some mid-range, actually not that much mid-range to start with, and high-frequency horns, but they were separate components. And it was noted that Clare Brothers in America had achieved quite a lot of success by basically measuring an articulated lorry, or a semi as they would call it, measuring the width, cutting it in half, seeing what size box fitted in, put 2 18s, I think 4 10s, and a bunch of high frequency stuff, all in one box. How it was timed, I have no idea. I don't think it was. It was just a wall of sound. So we'd been making, I mean, TMS3 happened about 1980, 81. And up until that point, we'd been making separates. Because if you physically aligned, we were into time alignment back then. This is before we even had, I think in 1979, they used to call it Bucket Brigade. It was the first kind of delay that was appearing. And it was, I suppose it was a chip handing something on, and you know, the thing in digital world is that it's full of latency of a large or small amount, but it's always there because processing takes time. And that's one of the fundamentals about digital and analog, because analog is pretty well as instantaneous. I mean, I don't know that electricity travels down wire at the speed of light, but in theory it does, and that's pretty quick. 186,000 miles per second while we're here. I think that's a lot of why there is still a debate between analog and about analog and digital. And actually to get digital right is, I'm not against it by the way, but it's a much more involved and complex process, and therefore greater opportunity for it to go astray, go wrong, and it certainly has done in the past. Things are getting better at the moment, thank God.
Well, digital is always improving, isn't it? Can you see that? Can you see it ever? I mean, technically improving. I'm not talking about the audio side. That's a whole different debate. But can you ever see it get to a point where it's as good as analog, or do you think analog will always? Yeah. Absolutely.
I think it's just getting to that stage now. In fact. So the TMS3 so up until that time we'd had everything in separates, and one of the people that I have a partner called John Newsham, and we met by a swimming pool in LA. He was over there with Steve Hillage, and I was at TFA Electrosound designing a system for them, and we were really into audio, and we were really into loudspeakers, and we were keeping things in separate parts, and that way we could, when we set them up, we could move them physically to get them to sit together, which is really, really important. But it was complex to set up, and see, I suppose all the way through this, I've always put the audio first and been that way. If it's a bit difficult to deal with, to me that doesn't matter, because the main thing is to get the audio result. Anyway, we were advised to put it all in one box, and so we came up with stuff that would fit nicely into one box. And looking back on it, it was really quite heavy, but compared with, it was about half the weight and size of the American box that had inspired the idea. and twice as loud because we were using horns and it was much more efficient. And I think the efficiency is really, really important in loudspeakers.
Well, you obviously hit on something there because you won a Queen's Award for export for the TMS3.
We did. Well, I mean, just the whole company did. Turbo Sound as it was.
I mean, that's like 20 years from a field, or less than 20 years from hanging out with a bunch of hippies, putting together some speakers you thought were pretty good, to winning a Queen's Award for industry. Was that a surprise?
It wasn't necessarily what I thought was going to happen, but I was very, very pleased to achieve that actually, and I will say that I was very impressed with the Queen. She's got a really amazing vibe, and Prince Philip was a right laugh. So, you know, that's about all I can report. And she must think that everybody in the world has a sweaty hand because, even though I was not over impressed, my hands are sweaty.
Yeah. So you went on to develop your turbo sound work to a higher level by setting up Funktion One, which is where you are now, in 1992.
Correct.
What inspired you to go and you developed the axe head, for example? But previously, of course, you invented the flashlight and floodlight systems. But what inspired you to kind of move on to do your own thing with Funktion One, and how long did it take for you to actually take the leap from having I suppose if Turbo Sound is a successful company, why would you go, I think I can do better? There you are again thinking, oh, I can do better than this.
Well, yes, you're not wrong. I mean, Turbo Sound would have carried on, but I was much more focused on the engineering than the business side. So basically, I got in with people that were much commercial to, let's say, a very selfish degree. And in the end, I suppose it caused the demise of Turbo Sound. It got sold to the wrong people, and we negotiated our way out to do our own thing, because to me, the whole thing was just one continuing experiment. Mm-hmm. And nobody had actually told me that it was supposed to be finished. And, you know, because it's a bit like mountain climbing. You think, and I've actually been through this, where you think you can see the top. Well, you can see the top. When you get there, you realise that it's not like this, it's actually like this. And so you can only see that bit, and then when you get there, then you can see the next one. So you go for that, and actually it goes on, and it's quite exhausting. But that's how it is, and once the sound gets better to a point, it allows you to see further, and then so you start aiming for that. And what impressed you becomes everyday and commonplace, and whatever it is that's growing or understanding. So this is the amazing thing about our hearing is just so phenomenal. I mean, I was going to touch on these things anyway, but you know, let's just consider the fact that every time you hear something, you don't have to do any thought process to know where it came from. That arrives with it. You know, you instantly know. Well, how does that work? Well, apparently there may be more to it, but at least we know that so that annoying fan over there, we all know it's over there. Well, I do in particular, because it's hitting this ear, and then it's hitting that ear. Mm. And a good friend at Derby University, Peter Lennox, Dr. Peter Lennox, they did an experiment with students, blindfolded, and had a sound source, and how much do we have to move this sound source before a person notice? And I don't know, they supposed did about a dozen people, and it turns out to be as small as 1 or 2 degrees, which is just incredible. And if you do the trigonometry on that, it means that we are capable of discerning separate events as close together as 15 or 18 microseconds, which is, you know, and we talk about delays and stuff in milliseconds. Well, this is yeah. So
yes.
So you know, our equipment is absolutely unbelievable, and every day it's being abused out there in the world.
Well, yeah, on the subject of abuse, I want to mention that later, actually, about how it gets abused. But before then, can I just ask you, you're quite vocal. I've got that fan. You know, when you mentioned, since you mentioned that fan,
No, I'm
aware.
sorry.
I'm aware of it, but I'm sure everyone here might have been aware of it when they got in. But you're saying the hearing's amazing, and then it kind of just disappears in the background. Now you mention it, it's really obvious again.
Yeah.
But anyway, you're right. Hearing is amazing. You are quite vocal about the difference between line array and point source. Just explain to everyone what the difference between those two are, and what are your thoughts? Why are you quite vocal about the difference between them?
Because they're like a smear of paint on the wall rather than being in the landscape.
Just briefly, in basic terms, explain the difference between line array and point source.
Point source is where you're at any given part of the spectrum, you're supposedly only hearing one loudspeaker or successfully combined multiple of loudspeakers. Line array is mutual reinforcement, I guess, typically of direct radiators. And part of the problem, so in the vertical plane, you get enough dimension to contain the waves, so they tend to be vertically quite narrow in their coverage pattern. And I mean, the original line arrays were those, actually I was going to say the 4x12 column from Charlie Watkins, but not at all, because they go right back to the 30s. I think it was Olsen, in fact, who first put a bunch of speakers together. So if you take like an 8-inch speaker, which is probably a reasonable size for it, or 6.5, it's only going to be the upper frequencies, which are contained by the dimension of the loudspeaker and therefore would have some directivity. The lower frequencies, because see, the thing about light is the rainbow, it's just 1 octave. We got 10 octaves in sound, and 2,000 times the resolution, because you can do further maths with the 15 or 18 micros, and it's about 2,000 times on the basis that frame rate for visuals is 28 per second. And you need to be going 2,000 times quicker than that to get to a point where you don't know there's, you know, it's going like that with audio. Plus, it's 10 times broader. So it's, you know, when I say it's a fantastic sense, it really is. I mean, it leaves the visual sense standing. And it's, as you can probably tell already, it's a constant annoyance to me that the visual takes precedence over audio all the time. And
yeah, it does.
And you know, and I just say, well, our biggest problem is the stuff's invisible, so anybody can pretty well say anything and get away with anything, and they do. Anyway, sorry, I forget where I was going with that.
I was asking you. You're quite vocal about the difference between line array and point source.
So, yeah. So the higher frequencies will be focused and directional, but the lower frequencies will be going everywhere. So if you put them in a line, then the lower frequencies will also start to get contained by the dimension that you're creating by making a line. You can make a line this way as well, and you can have it narrow, and in fact that's what people think they should be doing with bass. Put it in a line underneath the stage so that the dispersion goes upwards, and it's quite narrow this way. I'm kidding. I'm not being serious about that. That is what goes on, and that's what happens. But personally, I don't think it's a very good idea for those simple reasons. So the line array is a way to get directivity out of multiple speakers in the lower frequencies. And when it first appeared, it would have been a column, all in one box, and it would have been straight baffle. These days, I mean, the advantage is the convenience, and that's definitely probably the #1 consideration for most people. What's wrong with them is that where they join successfully in the lower frequencies, you get, it's homogeneous. But as you go up in frequency and the dimension's getting smaller, so there comes a point where, particularly say you've got 6.5 or 8-inch loudspeakers, they will start to become point sources in their own right, because the wave's contained. It's small enough to be contained by that size of driver. Am I still making sense?
I'm sure you are to some people. No, you're making perfect sense for those with a technical mind.
So when you've got multiple sources, you actually hear them. It's like, so at 15 and 18 microseconds, if you take the average line array, there are parts of the spectrum where the difference, so if you're hearing, say, 14 speakers and they're all at slightly different distances from you, all your transient is going to be smeared. This is absolutely key. And when, I was quite amazed to hear that Colin told me that you used the paper I wrote for, well, I forget what it was now, but Soft Focus, and it was all about this, the fact that, because I was wondering why I was at such loggerheads with, as usual it would appear, with the trends going on, and why I just couldn't stand them. And so I had to think hard about it, and it's because they don't have a singularity of delivery. And all the excitement is in the edges, the transient. And it's interesting that it's quite like that with coasts. Coasts are very interesting places where sea and land are meeting. Anywhere there's boundary conditions, there's something interesting going on. And the average waveform, you've got your attack, which is your transient, so your rise time, a bit of sustain or not, as the case may be, and some decay. And if you were to take a guitar and a violin and you take the front end off them, and they're playing the same note, it'd be quite hard to tell which was which without the transient to tell you, give you the cue. And it's interesting with speech that the vowels and have no intelligibility without the S's and the T's, which seem to be in the peak of the Fletcher-Munson curve.
What's the Fletcher-Munson curve?
It's the fact that our sensitivity across the spectrum is not a linear thing, and it actually peaks between 2 and 5 kilohertz, and focused on 4, and that's where if you like, the presence region of sound is, and where everybody mixes into that as well, because it's the, it's the attention grabbing frequency. Children scream in that area. We're really, really sensitive, and it's something I typically have to do all the time when I'm engineering out somewhere in the world with whoever, is that I'm pulling between 2 and 5K down, because if you put everything in the attention grabbing area, it's just a horrible spike that's very unpleasant. And you're missing out on all the other colours. So it's just like you're playing with blue and a bit of red, frankly, if you liken the audio spectrum to the visual spectrum, which is not a terrible thing to do. The work of the universe is built out of octaves. And
well, you clearly do link the two spectrums. I like your coast analogy. You see something and then you automatically try and link it to the audio spectrum. But obviously your technical knowledge is far superior to mine, obviously. But was it your love of sound and the fact that you wanted to build speakers? Did that make you learn more about the technical side?
Yeah.
Or was that the technical side that something was always there?
As I slightly mentioned earlier.
So you hear something, go, why is it doing this? So you go and find out how to do it.
Yeah, in a way. Or why do I feel like this about it? Why am I not buying into these direct radiators? Why do I want horns? What is it about horns that make me feel excited? Why is it that they're all doing these line arrays and I think they're awful? Yes, okay, they might have constant directivity, but look at the price you're paying. The sound doesn't involve and engage. It's over there. The wind blows. I mean, they're hopeless outside. I mean, there's a lot wrong with them. But the thing that gets me above all is the assumption that it's all done. That's it. That's how they've got to be. It's finished. I mean, nobody told me it was over. No one discussed it with me, and I've been at it now for nearly 50 years, as you mentioned earlier, and watching what's going on. And all I can tell you is the reason I'm still doing it and still excited and involved is because it keeps getting better. And that's forward motion progress is a really exciting thing. I mean, you make a wonderful piece of music, and well, we didn't have that before. Now we've got it, and I can switch it on any time.
You mentioned wind direction outside can affect sounds.
Well, it does with line arrays. I mean, they phase all over the place.
Well, you had an issue with wind. You claim with wind direction with a Glastonbury, didn't you? Was it when it wasn't deemed loud enough by Michael Eavis? If you don't mind talking about
that. Anne's running for cover.
No, only because you
yeah, no, I
wind
can.
Direction.
I can actually talk about that. So, Michael, who I did develop a reasonable relationship with, and I was instrumental in the first permanent pyramid. I was in charge of the job. We did it with a beaten up old tractor, a couple of chainsaws, some drill attachments, telegraph poles, some trees, some sheet metal that he got off Ministry of Defence, funnily enough. Anyway, we built that pyramid in 7 weeks, and it rained every day for 6 of those weeks, I might add. And we did him proud on that. And that actually is a really interesting story in the program about the building of the pyramid. I was doing Status Quo in Wembley Arena at the beginning of it, and the first thing that on that pyramid was a huge 30-foot cube of a box of telegraph poles. Well, I hadn't quite got the supports right, and also we were trying to orientate it a certain way and make sure. I thought, if we're going to build a pyramid, it's got to be accurate. It's got to be 51 degrees, 51 minutes. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Well, and because I wasn't there, it got built with a bit of a dish, which actually turns out to be fortuitous, because I was very insistent on everything being done really tight and properly. And we had a really good carpenter, and he put a ceiling on it. But because it was raining all the time, we finished up with a 30-foot diameter saucer with water in it about this deep, about 30 foot in the air. So we got these 4 diagonals in place, and that is up. No, I won't expand too much. I'll just try and keep the point. So we got these. So we got the 4 basic pyramid diagonals, and apparently that's all you need. So you can take the blade off a chainsaw and you can put a drill on it instead. And this is some of the things we were using. So we had these lying about an inch diameter. So we drilled 3 holes in the floor, and we'll say one is where this piece of gaffer tape is, and there's another couple about here, and there's about 7 of us involved. And being the big kids we all were, we stood around watching the water go out, as you would. And then we noticed that this one, the water was going out the other way round. It wasn't going out the right way, the way it should do in the Northern Hemisphere. It was going out the way it goes in the Southern Hemisphere. So I crouched down and put my finger in and twizzled it round to go the other way. And it wouldn't have it. It reasserted itself. And that's absolute fact. And there was 7 people witnessed that, myself included. And
hang on, all hippies? No, I'm only kidding. Carry on.
Yes,
yeah, all right,
I suppose they were.
No, carry on. Okay,
it was about bloody 10 o'clock in the morning, actually.
Right, okay. Yeah.
it wasn't late enough for anybody to be out of their boxes.
Okay,
if
fair
that's
enough.
what you're trying to
No,
imply.
no. I was just merely trying to make a point. No.
All right.
So
Okay,
so
yes,
it
they were all
wouldn't-
hippies.
So it wouldn't
They
write
were.
itself. Yeah. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, and so we thought, well, let's have a look at this because this is a bit intriguing. Because these two are not doing it, so we dropped a plumb line from the middle, and it was about this hole where the action was going on was about 2 inches off the dead centre of the pyramid, and it was obviously doing something. And one of my regrets when they foolishly allowed it to burn down was I wanted to go back there one day and put that water back in and do it again, because that was probably in my life, well, this life, the strongest manifestation of the metaphysical that I've ever seen. It really was. There it was. It was water going out the wrong way.
So there again, you see something, and rather than just accept it, you want to go and work out why it does that.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, time's a bit, I mean, I was a bit mixed up with audio, but that is certainly a line of inquiry, I would say, for anybody. I don't know how big the pyramid has to be to achieve that effect. So we had quite a relationship with Evis, and to be honest, I got fed up with the quality of the bands that were going on. It wasn't about the ideals of love, peace and consciousness. It was starting to become commercial. People were saying, well, you can have this band if you take this pile of nonsense. And John and I had been doing it for years, and we'd been getting a really nice sound with the flashlight system, but it wasn't going anywhere. It was starting to ossify, if you like. And I really wanted to go further. I wanted to explore surround sound. So we more or less handed it on a plate to Britannia Row. And we went off and did Experimental Soundfield, which was an ambiosonic soundfield with it was Underworld and a few DJs that we'd been very much exposed to what I'd actually called dance music in the mid 80s to early 90s, and you know, that was a big smiley face. There's a breath of fresh air coming in again. People have been positive.
House,
yeah, Acid House. It was fantastic. Loved it. And that's the sort of thing we were doing there, and that's what I wanted to do. And so we kind of abandoned it, and we did the thing called Experimental Soundfield. That was, wow. That was, I mean, I should write a book one day, but
You should write a book.
that got a bit strong, and I never went back to Glastonbury for 15 years.
I was going to ask you about it later, but I'll ask you that now. You said there's no difference between live music and you say dance music. You're talking about DJs playing recorded music, right?
They're all using the same audio spectrum. Granted, there's a little bit more bass involved in dance music.
Yeah, that's what I was.
But that's all, really.
So listen, tell us about you. You've got a new system. I mean, you've taken everything you've learned over the years, right? Tell us about your new system. Is it Vero or Vero? How do you say it?
Vero.
Vero. Tell us about your Vero system.
It's Latin.
It looks, as someone has pointed out to me, it looks very much like a line array system, but you claim it's not. What's the difference?
Well, I was going to claim anything. I suppose I'd claim it was a vertical array. What do I do with this? Okay, so I mean, I told Colin this already, but it was an April Saturday morning, and it was the first bit of warm sun. So I'm outside trying to get a bit on my body because, you know, after winter in our neck of the woods, you could do with it.
Once a hippie, always a hippie, right? Yeah.
No.
Bit of sun on your body, yeah.
Anyway, I'm lying there trying to, you know, just trying to relax, not think about anything particularly, just go with the flow. Anne's very, very, very upset because she's just read that one of our people in Manchester actually has decided he's going to get a line array, and he's abandoned us. But you know, he was a good friend, and we never actually heard it from him, we read it in the papers, which is never a great thing. And Anne was really, really upset to the point.
So Anne's your partner, yeah?
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, I didn't, you know, it's not a good look. And I thought, okay. He said, you've got to do something, because you can't carry on not doing something. So I think, well, she's right. I've got to do, so I put all your prejudices or whatever to one side. What can you think about a line array that's good? And to be fair, the only good thing I can think about them is that they are convenient to rig. And you can get a bloke each side really easily, and they go up fast. So, well, okay, well, we can do that, but we don't have to use that principle. And I'd been experimenting with coupling horns anyway, and had found out how to get them to couple successfully. And that's, well, that's something I'm not prepared to share with everyone just yet, because although we often get marginalised, that people do watch very carefully what we do. Because I think when it comes to loudspeakers, you see, everybody else is playing around with DSP. We're still developing drivers and waveguides, and that's where you really should be doing it. Because, I mean, the system you're going to play, I'm going to play in a while, if I'll ever stop talking, is got no EQ at all. It's just got the balance between the 4 components, but there's no EQ on it. Right, these days it's the norm. Now, back in the 60s, when EQ had just been invented, and after all, EQ is taking the same signal and introducing it out of phase to cause cancellation, so you get a phase shift. And you know, the hi-fi nuts back then, whether they could measure it or not, knew they wanted things phase flat, if possible. And that's a very rare event. If you do look at the phase response of anything, it can be quite scary, because that's what the ear likes to hear. And phase is actually just a very small increment of time. So it's like you see phases on degrees on a clock. Actually, it's a spiral, and so phase is a very tiny amount of time. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that, because it's worth joining all those things together in your head, bearing in mind how accurate we are with time in our hearing. So I thought maybe we can implement this in a form. We'll paint it black. We'll put grills on it. We'll have it looking like all the other ones. There's a bit of a difference in it. It's got a curved front, which most of them, I don't think any of the others do. But aside from that, it's pretty well looks like it's a vertical array. A friend of ours did some measurements for us, because we wanted a third party, well-respected measuring guy to come in. And we had 6 hanging up. If you turn off 3, the textbooks say you should get 6 dB reduction in level. And if you double it, you'll get a 6 dB increase. Well, of course, that's in a perfect world. And this is a man who's measured lots and lots of loudspeaker systems. And he's very mild-mannered, and he doesn't normally swear. But we did this, and he swore. So I'm walking over to his computer where he's got things. And he said, I've never seen this before. We just turned 3 off, and we got a perfect 6 dB reduction. Usually there's so much confusion that you get 4, you're lucky if you get 5. It doesn't, you know.
Did you know this was going to happen, though?
No. No, I didn't. It was corroboration of the direction we were going in. So it's basically completely coherent. And I managed to get, if you like, a vertical array that delivers the kind of transient that keeps the music exciting. And so we've done it, and it's beyond point source, and it's beyond line array.
But do you think it's your experience combined with your technical knowledge, everything you've learned from experience leads to these things happening? I mean, because you say, oh, you said that 6 dB drop never happens, but you said it was perfect. Is that because of your experience? You're applying your experience and knowledge to your product?
Absolutely, but doing things that sound right. That, you know, that, and that's how we develop. That's the best thing we got. This is the thing we're trying. How does it go against that? You've got a sonic memory of about 3 seconds. The emotional effect of music can last all your life, but your actual memory of what you've just heard, that's it. So we do everything by empirically and measure it afterwards. And because we're making sound systems for human beings and not for machines. And you know, humans have a very particular way of receiving sonic information.
So in your experience, right, you need that technical knowledge, we've established that, but you also need that experience of trying things out. What has the edge? What's more important? The experience or the technical knowledge?
I don't think you can have one without the other, actually.
No, I know, but I know you can't have one without the other, but which would have the edge, which is more important? What has given you the results you've got, your experience or your technical knowledge? Which has the edge?
Well, okay, the experience. Yeah, experience would imply a period of time and a growth of knowledge, whereas when I was starting, I didn't have that track record, but I knew what I liked, and I think actually that's the most important thing. If you're into audio, you've got to have a feel for it, and the best part about it is the dimension in it. And like when could be a good moment to mention this. There's a book by Paul Stavros, who was an engineer in Air Studios for about 30 years, and he's got some very interesting things to say. And one of his stories is about some guys who were going around the world measuring brainwave patterns from people doing all kinds of different things. So alpha, beta, theta, and they wired up a guy who was just settling into a mastering session, a final mix, and they remarked that his brainwave patterns were pretty well identical to a Buddhist monk going into meditation.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, so now that completes that circle for me. Because that's how I feel, and I've always felt about it. And because it is a landscape, and you know, the better the production, the better the loudspeakers, the clearer the picture, the brighter the colours, the greater the depth and dimension.
Yeah.
And if you think about it like that, then you'll get a long way.
Okay, well, I can tell people are gagging to hear the speaker, so we'll just have a few more brief questions. You're renowned for your bass, your systems are renowned for bass. You've just developed a 32-inch sub-bass unit. Tell us a bit about that.
Okay.
Why?
People have been wanting deeper and deeper, as well as more bass. All the way through this, you know, for just every year, we need a little bit more. It needs to go a bit deeper. And, you know, there's, we've always done this horn-loaded thing, because when a bass player is going like this, all the notes come out with equal impact or punch. So we tend to favour it. Thing about the ported method, the classic bass bin out there in the world at the moment is 218s, or more heading towards a couple of 21s these days, but they're basically reflex style, if you like. They've got ports. And they're all right, but they can be quite often one-note hooters. And they certainly haven't got any dynamic. So, but if you've got a certain kind of bass, they could go quite low. So the reason for the 32 was to keep the horn loaded dynamic, but actually get down to, in fact, 24 hertz. and that's a flat line that's where it's going away. 32 dimensions, scaling it, gave us that frequency. Claudio Lestrucci at PowerSoft said they do pulse width modulation amplifiers, and they said what they like to work into is incredibly low impedances. How he gets to making this linear motor from that idea, but he's got a 10 kilowatt monoblock of an amplifier and a very clever way of moving. You know, there's been various attempts to make bass over the years other than a moving coil in a circular magnetic field, which is obeying on Fleming's left-hand rule, I believe.
I'll take your word for that.
About, you know, force and movement. It's a bit like a maglev, you know, I don't know, it's something of that power. This is like horsepower. In fact, it can push with about half a ton of force. So why is this important? Think of bass as like you need a bulldozer, and high frequencies are like a hummingbird. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the breadth of the spectrum. There's orders of magnitude between bass, and bass waves were longer than this room, and the high frequencies are like this. So that's why we need multiple components, because you can get everything you want out of one light bulb. Yeah. But because the spectrum's so broad, we need to break it up. So getting back to the 32, this appeared on the market. I thought, well, I know what to do with this, and if we don't do it, somebody else will. And other people were starting. There's a load more stuff we could say, but basically we've now experienced transient bass below 30 hertz, and it's quite amazing. It's not this like woolly, quite nice warm stuff, but it's not got that dynamic and punch in it that we've now got, and it's quite amazing.
Do changes in musical styles and production techniques affect what you do? Or is there a kind of core message that you stick to regardless of what's happening creatively?
I mean, we're trying to, all the time, we're trying to be as true to that's what vero actually means in Latin, it's in truth. We're trying to be true to the signal it's given. Now, I'd say half the DJs that we've had 32s with have not even got any energy at the frequency it likes to work at, which is about...
I'll take that as a challenge, yeah. Carry on.
45 down to 25. Sometimes they're doing nothing. Mm-hmm. And yet, anyway, there's a lot of contradiction.
You're doing the same for me in March, aren't you? A bit of pressure straight away. Has anyone got any questions that's come up from that? Mike has the mic. That's the only reason Mike's got the mic, because his name's Mike. Here's the first question. Tell us who you are, and if you could stand up, please, and speak nice and loud so we can hear you.
Hi, I'm Darren. You mentioned that you've developed your array source speakers mostly because there's a demand for line array. If you were setting up a concert, would you choose them over your traditional point source?
It depends on its size, really. If it was big, you know, like above 5,000, we'd probably go for the Vero, because frankly, I enjoy the convenience and the speed of putting it up as well. So, but in my mind, the components are very similar to what's here already, but in a completely different configuration. So, I'm quite happy with it. I'm quite happy to say we are doing a vertical array because it sounds the way it should. It's still got that fantastic stereo image, and you know, it's here. It's not over there.
So, but you've taken an idea and thought, well, I can make it better. But you like the convenience thing, which you said you like.
Yeah.
You've just thought, well, no, hang on, this could be better. This just goes back to what you were doing in the 60s, right?
I guess so. Yeah, well, it's the same attitude.
Yeah, exactly. Any more questions? Yep, we've got a question over here.
John Jones, a member of staff at Glyndwr University. We've talked about lots on components. Have you ever considered ribbon drivers?
Yes. I don't know what to say. They can be quite fragile. I'm sure things are a bit different now. They're quite hard to horn load successfully. They're not that efficient. They are pleasant though, I agree. So I have considered them, but haven't finished up using them.
Any more questions? Yeah, we've got another question here.
Hi there. I think you may know me. I'm Ian Parkin from VL Audio. I actually stock quite a lot of Funktion One's products and know them quite well, but not the sort of Vero system. What I have found from experience, and I'm not here for a product launch, but compared to other systems, they are very, very easy to actually get the initial EQ right for a room. And that really is down to the design of the loudspeaker rather than the processing elements that come with it. If you take a comparable system that may be also perceived in the dance market, if you look at the base settings you'd have to put into the processors just to get the system to run, they're rather more complex than Funktion One. Yet again, that points back to the actual loudspeaker itself, and thus ultimately it points back to Tony. Thank you.
Well, I think that was a compliment rather than a question. So there you go.
Thank you.
So tell us, before you blow our minds, literally, what's the future hold? I mean, how long do you keep doing this? I mean, do you pass the mantle to anyone?
I'm trying. I'm really trying. We've got some young guys. Somebody started about 3 or 4 months ago, and we've had another guy who's about 5 years now. They're getting the idea.
So you're confident Funktion One will be around long after we've all
Oh, it should be.
departed?
It wants to be. Yeah. I mean, it's it's hard to say. I'm still excited about it, and definitely intend to keep going. We have just recently reached a new level with it. And I'm all fired up again.
No, that's good. Well, your passion comes across. It's good that you're still excited about it. I can tell you now, as someone who's been DJing for over 30 years, promoters love to get excited to tell me or other DJs that we've got a Funktion One, and it's all part of the kind of the brand identity, which people would pay good money for your brand identity, and you've got it all through hard work and passion, basically. And long may it continue. So
thank you, Graeme.
Let's have a round before Tony plays us some sound. Let's have a round of applause for Tony out from Funktion One. Thank you very much for coming along.